Hello, and welcome to a new installment in the original Norwood House Press series, Past the Pages, where we show you the faces behind the pages of some of our readers' favorite titles. I'm Christine, the managing editor, and today I'm speaking with Patrick, a terrific illustrator best known at Norwood for illustrating our popular beginning-to-read title, The Birthday Card. Patrick, thank you so much for joining us today. We're happy to have you on the Past the Pages series.
Thank you. I'm proud to be invited. I'm surprised to be invited.
Tell us a little bit more about yourself and what you do.
Okay. I'm a freelance illustrator. When I ever do school visits, I always ask if they know what freelance means, and then I explain it. But you guys probably already know. I work for lots of different publishers, lots of different kinds of assignments. One of the craziest things I did was one time I was commissioned by an FM rock station in Hartford, Connecticut, to design the exterior of an entire city bus. And the only art direction that I got was include our call letters, and the rest of it was just up to me, and it was fun. But mostly I do children's books and magazine illustration, and that's where my heart is.
Why did you decide to pursue illustration as your career? Was this a career path you were always interested in?
Well, I was always going to be an artist. As far back as I can remember, I always drew and painted, and I always wanted to. That's the only thing I ever thought of being. It just came so naturally to me, and I was one of those kids that constantly filled the empty margins on his test page with drawings and the book covers and things like that. I was constantly drawing in class, and it was just the way I went. And then when I was, I think 11 years old, at that point, we had 5 children in our family, and we had 5 television sets. And my mom said to my father one night at dinner, you know what? We're either going to have to get rid of the TVs or the children. And I think legally we have to keep the children. So she got rid of all our TVs, and it was horrendous. It was heartbreaking. It was terrible. It was apocalypse now for about 2 weeks. And then I started filling my time with reading. And I was always a reader, but I became just an avid reader. I said I was always drawing in class and getting yelled at by my teachers until 6th grade. And then in 6th grade, I had a teacher named Mrs. K. And there were 2 things about Mrs. K. First, she was my first teacher who I thought was pretty. I just had a crush on her. She was right out of college, and we were her first class that she ever taught. And she was the first teacher who didn't yell at me for drawing in class. She went out of her way with finding ways to incorporate me creating artwork into the curriculum. For instance, one time she passed out Swiss Family Robinson to the entire class to read, and they were supposed to write a book report about it. And she called me up to her desk and she said, I don't want you to write a book report. I want you to draw 1 picture for every chapter. And was genius because A, I felt special. B, I got to do what I love to do. And she knew that I would have to read the book to know what to draw. So she was a genius. And then I had to go down to our school librarian, Mrs. Gross, and ask her to help me find other books so that I could see what kind of clothes they wore and what the ships looked like and all kinds of things like that. So without even realizing it, I was starting to do research. And it took me another 20 years probably. I was already working as a professional illustrator when I realized that she was my first art director. And that was my first illustration job. And at the time, I was working on a book called I Have a Weird Brother Who Digested a Fly. And I dedicated that book to Mrs. K. And I tried to hunt her down. I was like, whoa, maybe I could call Oprah and she could help me find her. I found one of those places where you pay $50 and they'll give you, they'll find the person for you online. And they sent me a list of 130 Sandra K's. And so I just started calling the one that was closest to my hometown, and I figured I'd work my way out. First call, it was her, and she had just retired. And I said, I don't think you remember me, but I told her what she meant to me and how she changed my life. And I said, you know, that was just your first year of teaching. You must have done this for hundreds of students over the years. And I just wanted to tell you that I appreciate you. And it was a very emotional call. And then she said, I was just packing everything up because I'm retiring this year and I still have some of your artwork. Losing the TV, learning how to read for pleasure, and then just becoming crazy about reading. And then illustration just made perfect sense. And all my favorite books from when I was a child were, beautifully illustrated. And so it was like it was always waiting there for me. And I just had to discover it. That's all.
You mentioned reading a lot for pleasure as a kid, or at least forced to from your mother after the TVs were taken away.
Right.
Did you have a favorite book as a kid?
Picture books, yes, there was absolutely, without a doubt, Go Dog Go by P.D. Eastman. The way it was written is sort of like, it was kind of like a book form of Laugh-In. They were just little short things that were funny. I love the relationship of the male dog and do you like my hat dog? Are you familiar with this book?
Oh, yes. I actually read it quite a bit as a kid myself, too.
And then in the end, that 2-page spread of the party in the top of the tree, I would stare at that and wish that I was at that party. And I would worry about, why are they jumping on a trampoline at the top of a tree? Somebody's going to get hurt. Wow, look at all those ice cream flavors. It was just, I love that book. And I think about it sometimes when I'm doing things, especially that spread of putting extra things into my work so that when you're reading it for the 5th or 6th or 10th or 100th time, maybe you'll discover something that you didn't ever see before. And another illustrator like that is Tommy Ungerer, who's one of my all-time heroes. I love his book, The Hat and the Beast of Monsieur Racine. There's a kind of a chaotic, anarchic quality to his work, and you see things that you may not normally see in a picture book. In the background, you'll see a tree stump with an axe with just a little bit of blood dripping off the tree stump. And you're like, what happened in that? Why did he include that? Or a guy getting his eye poked by an umbrella in a crowd. There's just all these beautiful little details. He's kind of like the Marx Brothers of illustrators. I just love his work. So those were a couple of them that really press me, stick with me.
Speaking of other illustrators, you're a member of the Picture Books Artists Association.
Yes.
Can you tell us what that is and what being a member means?
Well, it's a group of illustrators that we're mostly in the United States, but we have members in all over the world as well, in Tibet, in the UK, but when I joined it, I was a freelance illustrator, and of course I work at home alone, and there's a lack of feeling a part of a community. There's a sense of isolation with that this completely eradicated. This group is kind of like, when I first joined, I was so thrilled because it felt like I was in art school again. I had access via internet and email and website to all of these other illustrators in the children's publishing industry. And anytime there was a question about how do you do your research, what's a good source for it, how do you mix this paint with this material, any technical things, any industry things, or if you just wanted to vent about, the frustrations that you were having, you had a group of people who were all like-minded right there. And I've made some lifelong friends who I've never met in person, but we have a website for showcasing members' artwork. And we also have the Dust of Everyday Life blog. And it's just, I have friends that like Kevin Atterbury out in Seattle, and Brian Ballinger in Indiana, and, just all these different people all over the place who, if I get stuck, I know that I can call Brian or Kevin, and they can tell me, what keys to hit in Photoshop that I'm missing, or, any technical things. And it's just a valuable resource. It's one of the only groups that I've ever joined and been happy about joining.
One thing you mentioned is kind of the process of illustration. Can you describe more about your own process for when you take on a book project?
Well, it's pretty basic and nothing special fancy about it. I talked to the art director, the editor, and they kind of fill me in with all of the main points. I read the manuscript. They tell me about if there's anything special that I need to be aware of, what their point of view is, what they're kind of going for with the project. And then I keep all that in mind while I do my research. And then the first thing I'll do is probably start working on the character sketches. A lot of times the art director will want to review them before we proceed. And then it's just creating the sketches. That's the hardest part to me. That's the work, doing the layout, the sketches, figuring out how to serve the story, but also advance it and make it something that's interesting to look at, and more than interesting, but inviting. It wants to draw you in, leaving room for the text, fitting a horizontal idea into a vertical space and vice versa. All of the different problems, and not problems, let's call them challenges that come up. And then submitting the sketches and holding my breath to find out what the art director and everybody else thinks of them. And then after that, it's the fun time. My favorite part is painting the final art. That's just a joy to me. The hard work is the sketches. That's when I listen to music. The fun part is painting, and that's when I listen to audiobooks because I can shut off that part of my brain and I can just enjoy the physical part of painting the illustrations, and that's much more intuitive and much more fun. That's my process. It's pretty straightforward and simple, but it's worked for me.
You mentioned the sketching in the painting phases. Can you tell us a bit more about the materials that you use for your artwork?
Well, when I first started out, I was, ink and watercolor on watercolor paper or illustration board. And then I kind of grew into using, there was an airbrush system that I used to love using Pantone inks, but then computers came around and at first I resisted digital art because it always looked like digital art to me, but now it's gotten to a point where it's just impossible to tell the difference. Now I draw on paper and then scan the images and then paint using Photoshop and layers, and this gives me a lot of flexibility. I can change colors in an instant. I can make corrections. I can drop something out and put something in. I can use elements of collage and photos. One of my favorite things in the last couple of years has been combining old photographs with illustration on top of them. And I've done a dummy of a book using that method, but I haven't done a published book yet using that method, but I love to do that. That's a goal. And after a while I started missing the smell of paint and the touch and feel of paper and canvas. And so what was your question?
No, you answered it perfectly.
Oh, okay.
What are some challenges of illustrating for a children's book that you've encountered?
Well, things have changed over the years as social ideas have changed. And I think for the most part, all of these changes are for the better. I like the inclusivity, the representation, making sure more people are represented than as far as ethnic groups or nationality, or whether you wear glasses or you are in a wheelchair or you're any number of things. Everybody is seems to be getting a little bit more representation, which I'm all in for. I had to learn how to interpret the manuscript in a way that is acceptable. For instance, I love Halloween, and one of my very first book was a Halloween book, which is funny because I used to get yelled at for drawing monsters and robots in class, and my first publishing job was designing a Halloween book with monsters and robots. So yeah. But I had a hard time coming up with costumes because they were saying, sorry, you can't use a hobo, which was what my go-to costume was growing up. Put a little charcoal on your face and put a bandana on a stick, and you got a costume. But that was no longer good. You couldn't have witches because that's a religion. You couldn't have ghosts because that's spirituality. No way could you have the devil. But that made me say, okay, well, then this kid is coming dressed as a basket of dirty clothes, and this kid is going to come dressed as broccoli. And they actually let me have one kid come dressed as Elvis. So so it was just learning about what is acceptable and what is not, and who your audience is. When I'm working for a client, I'm working for a client, and the children who read the books are the ultimate clients.
I think that's actually a really good note for us to end for today. It's been a pleasure to speak with you, Patrick. Thank you again for taking the time to talk with us about all this.
Well, thank you very much. I'm thrilled, honored, and like I said, surprised to be invited. So thank you so much.
No,
it was nice meeting you.
Oh, it's been a pleasure meeting you, and it's been an honor being able to speak with you and learn all this from you too.
Great.
If you'd like to learn more about Patrick's work with Norwood or to see more videos like this, please click on the links in the description below. Please also like this video or subscribe to our YouTube and other social media channels to see more content like this from Norwood. Thank you again for watching. Happy reading!